The Gauteng province has created a relief for the benefit of individuals within the sports and arts sector. This is out of the realization that sports and arts continue to be one of the sectors that is hardest hit by the COVID pandemic. And in this regard, as a caring government, we have found means of how we can create some form of relief for individuals within the sectors, but also possible job opportunities. And in this regard, one of the things that we have done with all the national events or national day events that we do have, we've made them virtual and are still able to employ and work with various artists and sports individuals. And this has been done from our Human Rights Day, our Freedom Day, and now with Youth Month. We continue to integrate artists and sports individuals within, so that whilst COVID does not allow for major events to take place, by going virtual, it enables us to still be able to utilize these skills and showcase the talent that the province has. With regard to the Gauteng Relief Fund that is created for individuals within the sports and arts sectors, this is a relief fund of 28 million, which we seek to find individuals who work within our communities. These may be individuals who teach art classes within communities, who coach soccer teams within communities, netball teams and so forth across the various sporting codes. These are the individuals who play a critical role in the development of our communities. These are people who ensure that our communities keep fit and, more importantly, are engaged within positive recreational activities. Our fund is geared at all these people, and all we ask is that you come and apply, visit our website, visit our social media pages at Gauteng SACR, that's at Gauteng SACR, and you'll be able to get more information. We really want to make sure that we assist these individuals because we appreciate the work that they do in our communities, because it is in line with what government seeks to do, and we want to make sure that people continue being engaged within positive activities such as recreation, within arts, within our sports, and so forth. So please do apply. This fund is for you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Youth Month Session 5, hosted by the Film and Publication Board. On a beautiful summer afternoon, we welcome everyone who has logged in. We know today our target audience are young people, and we invite you to this session where its Film and Publication Board is going to be having a conversation with young people, and knowing very much that young people are the very target audience that we work with. We are excited today to be sitting here and joining you and welcoming you to our session on the film and publications regulations and classification. This session is just going to be a conversation that we want to have with you young people on what goes into the process of content classification. We know some of you have joined us today, aspiring filmmakers, aspiring film creators. So we want to create an awareness on what is required for you to be a registered creator of films and for you to be able to distribute your content. I would like to acknowledge our partners who have made it possible for us to be sharing this platform. Our partners, National Film and Video Foundation, we acknowledge your support and your presence for this session. Our partner, Gauteng Film Commission, for making it possible for the FPB to be sitting here today and engaging young people. The Gauteng province that is supporting this initiative, the Department of Arts and Culture, and all other partners that have made it possible for us to be sitting here and sharing the platform with young people. With me today to have this conversation and to interact with you young people is the team from the Film and Publication Board. We have in the panel our Legal and Regulatory Affairs Manager, Mr. Pandeli Gregorio, who will just give you high-level information on the content regulation and how it is done and what is required of you as a film creator to be able to distribute or to create films in the country. We also are joined in the panel by Mr. Mzigaise Mota, who is our quality assurance, and as well as Ms. Maggie Pillay, who is also our quality assurance. So these people are the right people to talk to in this session because they are the ones who have the answers to the questions that you have. They are the ones who have the advices that you need as you want to venture into the film and distribution space. They are also the ones who have the knowledge and the information that would assist you to create a career in this film distribution space. And I would like to also acknowledge the role that is played by the National Film and Video Foundation as well as the Gauteng Film Commission in ensuring that content that is created is in this country by young people like yourselves gets supported financially, gets supported and promoted so that we get to see and to access locally created content that is created by ourselves. Now, in the session today, what we want to speak about, which is an issue that has been raised on a number of platforms, is how content creation influences the decision that we issue as the Film and Publication Board. Because remember, as the Film and Publication Board, we classify content, and by classifying content, we attach age ratings. So before we reach that point where we say this content is suitable for a 16, a 10, or a 7 to 9 year old, we follow a process that assists us to reach that point. Now, today's topic on content classification, we want to focus on the most contentious age ratings that we reach as the Film and Publication Board. We want to alert you and to share with you information that leads to the decisions that are called high-rated decisions, like your X18 decision, which is adult-only content, adult pornography, and your XX-rated content, which is content that is not permitted to be distributed, as well as refused classification. So the panel is going to take you through why we XX rated content. What is it that we have found in that content that leads to that decision? Why do we X18 content? What is it that we find in that content that leads to that decision? Now, the objective of the session today is to share this information with you as young upcoming creators and producers of films, so that as you go out and venture in your careers and you create films, you have this background information and you know what is permissible and what is not permissible for you to create content for your target audience. So you will know at the end of the session what informs an XX rating content and what is it that you shouldn't put in your content so that you do not get to that point of getting your content XX rated. Now, to set the tone today, we are going to start the session by exposing you to a clip, a short clip that would lead you to an engagement so that we can start having this conversation. Now, I'm going to request Ms. Maggie Pillay to introduce the film that we are about to view and to also highlight what is it that you are expected to do while we are viewing that film. Over to you, Maggie.
Thank you, Ms. May. Welcome, everybody. We're so excited about this venture together, and especially this particular session that we're going to have with you. To all our budding, youthful content creators out there, we know that you're going to be our future world-renowned filmmakers. So in this session, we actually are anticipating you guys, giving us a very live, dynamic, and vibrant engagement from a youth perspective on how you view content creation and how you view the job that we at the board do, and that is classification of content. So we want to give you an experience of viewing a film so that you understand how the board actually classifies films, but we are reversing the process. In this session, we are going to ask you guys to come in as the youth and the public to view the material that we have and then to classify it and to give it an age rating. And our expert panel will then go through your rating and your reasons for the rating, and we'll hopefully have a robust engagement on how this reflects on, let's say, your future careers as content creators, and what are the markers that you would probably have to look out for to enable you to make a film that will reach the widest audience possible. So we're looking forward to this. The film is called Langsan. It's an Afrikaans film. It's in subtitles. The director of this film is Harold Olsher. He was given a Director of the Year award in 2017. So let's see how we kick off with this. Let's see how you view the film, how you read it, how you interpret it, and what's your gut feel about this rating. And thereafter, our entire panelists will be there to take you through the steps, as well as to answer, as Ms. May says, all your questions and whatever guidance you might require. Over to you, Sir Osmic.
Hallo ma, ek sê jammer om te pla. Kan julle net vanmiddag na Kleinding kyk asseblief? Ons brand 'n bietjie vas. Dankie. Ek waardeer. Is maar se kind groot genoeg om vandag by ouma te gaan kuier?
Kan ek my handsakkie saamvat?
Ja. Toe. Kom.
Hallo bloeme. Hallo, ouma.
Goeiemiddag mevrou. Jy kom kuier.
Ja, ouma.
Kom gerus binne. Enetjie van elk.
Nou vriende, is het weer tyd dat ons 'n bietjie mekaar hou die blad skud en sê howdy there. Lekker heerlike dag vir ieder en elk van u. Want vandag hierdie Dinsdag sien ek as een van daai baie mooi dae wat vir u voorlê. Blou Maandag is agter die rug. Hier kom hy. Lekker dag vir u. Morning South Africa, and as I've just said, Blue Monday is right behind us and a lovely, beautiful Tuesday right ahead of you. Enjoy it.
Versies. Versies. Versies.
Kom eens zo.
Hallo oupa, ek het 'n bietjie vir ouma kom
Ek het
kuier.
gehoor, hier kom kuier 'n regte mevrou. Kom eens zo. Kom eens zo. Kom nader. Kijk hier zo. Voel eens zo. Voel je.
Jy het lekker geslaap, nee?
Not yet. Maggie, you can take the discussion from here. We are now back onto the session.
Okay, I hope you guys were able to process that film because we had started after the introduction and we actually finished before the end, but there's nothing much that you had missed. So just to take you through this process again, what we want you to do is to simply tell us, having watched the film, what rating you would give it and why you would give it that. And then also there are other films in the recent past that we have been, we at the board have classified, and they are films that have had some sort of controversy to it. These include Of Good Report and the other film called The Wound. Yes, those two films, if you can bring that into the conversation in terms of how you would have gone with the age rating on those two. So I'll come back to you now. I'm not sure, Ms. May, how we're going to get the feedback. Is it going to come via you?
Before we get to the feedback, I would like yourself and Mzi to unpack the issues in the clip that we have just watched, highlighting the elements that would inform the classification decisions. Looking at the subtitles, the language, and the actual scenes that are in the film. So let's just lay that foundation by highlighting for the benefit of our audience.
Okay, so if you watch the movie, right, you have a little girl who's actually living in an imaginary world, and it seems like her bliss is completely shattered when she goes through an experience. So in terms of the storyline itself and the themes, we actually are trying to ascertain from you, in terms of the filmmaker or the director, what is the intended message? What message is the director communicating to you through the character of the little girl? So within the entire film itself, we actually look at a number of classifiable elements, and we will assess those elements in terms of how frequently they appear, how intense they are, and what impact it has in terms of an intensity, let's say starting from no impact, low impact, mild impact, moderate impact, and strong impact. And then we will judge the film totally in terms of its overall impact cumulatively. So you have the issue of having to understand and read the narrative. Then you need to be able to pull out the subtle themes that the director is trying to communicate via that film. You'll have to also try to unpack whether there is a bona fide, genuine merit in the film. In other words, would the audience take away some sort of value? Is there a moral lesson that the film is trying to communicate to the audience? Is the audience being drawn into the film? Are they being provoked? Are they being educated? And so on. And so then you would be able to unpack the themes in relation to that. And then, of course, some of the elements that you might be familiar with are the elements of language, sexual conduct, substance abuse, violence. So I want you to pick up, many of you go to movies, so you know when you see our triangle with all the letters of the alphabet, each one refers to a specific classifiable element. So let's see what you have picked up in this particular film. I'll hand you over to my colleague Imzi to make any further contributions with regards to the film in terms of what we assess it on before we engage them on their age rating. Thanks, Imzi.
Thanks for that, Maggie.
Thanks, Maggie. Sorry, Mzi. Thanks, Maggie. I just want Mzi to highlight the issues around the subtitles. The film is an Afrikaans title, and it is subtitled, How Does the Actual Spoken Language in the Film versus the Subtitle influence the actual classification decision that we issue, so that it becomes very clear to our audience how the two are linked, the actual spoken language versus the subtitle of the film. So you can take up the conversation from there.
All right, thanks for that, Miss May. Just to simply answer your question, right? If you look at the way our classification as the FPP is structured, right? Our committees is normally a 3-member committee who are representatives of the diverse society that South Africa is and the demographics, right? So you'd find in a movie like this, we have someone from the African community, right? And 2 other members from different communities, right? So as much as there are subtitles, right, we also need to get those nuances of the Afrikaans language itself, because we know sometimes your subtitles don't do justice to the actual words that are being said, right? I can make a simple example with Ingleba, right, or your Knuckle City, right, where the word is disturbing, right? However, the word umnqondo would be used, right, in those movies, and you find the subtitles don't do justice to that word, right? Because in the South African context, it is disturbing, right? However, you find the subtitles will be in the way misleading. So you should be able to pick those things up in assigning the age rating. We don't only rely on the English subtitles. We also look at the original languages, because here in South Africa, we do have people who speak that language, who understand that language. So we look at it at that level of impact in Afrikaans, if it's going to be disturbing to a certain age group or not, right? And another thing, right, in this movie, what you look at, right, it's clear what the director is trying to convey, right? And I think it's the point that young filmmakers can take, right? He's trying to raise awareness, right, around issues of sexual violence, around issues of children being exploited, right, in our families, right? However, he is smart in using cinematography, right? Because we all know before you can go and shoot a movie, you have what you call a storyboard, right? Where you plan your shots, right? You plan your story, how to achieve a certain element without being graphic, right? Because with our guidelines, the more graphic or explicit the element is, the higher age rating it would attract. So you may find you are raising very relevant issues. However, in the way you're shooting your movie or your film, you find that you show very graphic details that even if the message is positive, the element would be stepping to a younger or to a younger age group. So we find still, as much as it contains the positive, it will attract a higher age rating. However, in this movie, it's different though, right? The director and the editors would have been graphic, would have been explicit in showing that scene of sexual violence that took place between them and that child in the movie. However, if you look at how they use the cinematography and the cinematic techniques, they didn't focus on the actual scene itself of sexual violence, right? The camera focused on the grandma, the grandpa, and the child. However, it was impactful in the sense that we knew what was happening. So as the FPP, as classifiers, we look at those elements, how graphic it is, how's the scene treated. Would viewers maybe at age 13, for example, or 16, be able to tolerate that kind of sexual violence in the movie? So with you young filmmakers out there, right, as much as you might want to convey a positive message, right, you might want to challenge the current dispensation, right, you must be careful in how you show it, how you shoot that movie, so that by the time it gets to the FPP and we have to classify it, it doesn't attract a higher rating because there were explicit scenes of certain elements in the movie. So we should always be cognizant of that, because our guidelines are open to the public, right? You are open to go to the FPB website and get the different age ratings and what is permissible in each and every age rating. So that when you do the movie or you create from scratch your storyboard, you know what, if you are aiming it at this certain target market, right? You know what to avoid, and what to show, for it to be impactful as well. So just all those things we look at for that in our classification.
Okay, Mzi, thank you so much. In the beginning of your feedback here, you have highlighted that the producer of this particular film, Langslan, had the intention of creating awareness around issues of sexual violence. Now, I want to bring Pandeli into the discussion now. Now, in instances where there is a young participant in a film, and the theme of the entire story is to highlight sexual violence against young people, how do we treat that from an FPB's classification process? Because if you have a young person who is younger than the ages of 18, shot in a film in a sexual context, the decision is to XX rate that. Now, in the instance where the producer wants to have that in the film for the purposes of creating awareness around sexual assault or abuse of young people, how should the content be created such that it does not get an XX rating? I want Pandeli to unpack it for us so that it becomes clear to our audiences here.
Thank you, Nthabiseng, and it's a very important question, right? Because I think any one of us who have just watched the clip would also maybe be drawn back and say, you know, something like that may warrant some level of age restriction, but some of us may even argue beyond age restriction, should we even be sharing such content like that, right? Is it content that we should all be consuming? And I think what I want to do is just make a reference for the benefit of our audience, right? To say that the Film and Publication Board has legislation which obviously creates it as an institution, but beyond it also sets certain parameters upon which we then classify content. It emphasizes in no particular terms, right? And does so for particular purpose. It says in some instances, some of the content that gets given to the FPB to classify will draw a refused classification, for want of a better term, right? In certain instances, it may also warrant an XX classification, right? So what do these terms mean? What does refused classification mean, right? In very simple terms, refused classification means that nobody will be able to consume that content. And when does that happen? That happens when, in the particular, for example, the content that we've just watched now, if child pornography takes place, right? And in essence, what our definition for child pornography does in the legislation that sort of guides our work, that's the Films and Publications Act. It says that if you have actors participating in a scene where sexual conduct takes place, and it includes things that we've just seen, that would warrant a refused classification rating, right? You've also, Nthabiseng, highlighted where sexual violence takes place, right? So if there is sexual violence such as rape, that will also draw an XX classification, right? And XX likewise has similar sort of categories. It also says that you're not necessarily able to purchase or watch such content. You may own it, but you can't purchase or watch it, right? It's going to draw that age rating. So how do we assist our colleagues, our prospective creators of content, right? How do we assist them in understanding what the consequences are? That even though it may draw a refused classification, even though it may draw an XX classification, we do have a particular provision in our legislation that says, but in certain instances where that does take place, we can apply a proviso. And that proviso assists us greatly, right? And it assists us by putting us in a position to say, so then in what instances do we then apply a proviso? It says to us, maybe the film that you are showing or wanting to show, wanting to create, it may have some sort of literary or artistic merit, right? And that's an interpretive tool that we would make use of as the Film and Publication Board, that we will say, well, if it does have this literary or artistic merit, right, and you'd have to motivate for it, it'll have to be something that we assist in understanding, right? We then can take it outside of those categories, refused and XX, and then put it into an age classification space, right? And when it does go into age classification, as Mzi, as Maggie have highlighted, it's going to draw a higher age rating. And there we're going to start off at the higher age ratings of 18, and where possible, possibly classify it lower, but you're going to have to start at 18. So the question that I want to pose to creators, right? And I think I saw some of the participants already indicating that this could possibly draw a 13 age rating, and maybe draw to their attention to say, why do they think, 13 would be appropriate in terms of what their thinking is, right? Because in terms of how we would apply the guidelines, the classification guidelines of the Film and Publication Board, it's going to draw a higher age rating. And I think colleagues have already given other examples of content that we've had to classify as an institution, which are quite topical content, which is something that we would debate quite often, where some people would say, I don't know if this would be content consumed by the public. Others would say this is controversial, but it is important for our communities to consume. It's an important debate that we need to have, right? And maybe also inform our audience why we make such decisions, right? So why do we make such decisions to escalate age ratings and increase them, right? But that's a topical question, and I'd love to hear from our audience. I'd love to hear what informs sort of their views and their perspectives on the issue.
Okay, Pandeli, you've mentioned that the FPB, in instances where the content has sexual violence against a younger a person, gets XX rated, but the FPB applies the proviso if the content has got educational or artistic merit. Now, I need you to unpack that for the benefit of our audiences. What do you mean by content that is educational? What is it that needs to be in that content for us to then say, instead of XX rating this content, we will give it a rating, an age rating based on the educational factor in it? What is that? What is that educational factor that we look for? As well as artistic merit. Just unpack it for the understanding of our audience. Anyone, in
Perfect.
fact, can come in to assist Pandeli there.
Can I just,
Exactly.
okay, all right. Go for it, Pandeli.
No, go ahead, Maggie. Let me give you the first bite, and then
Okay,
I'll come right
okay.
after you.
Okay, you come after me. All right. So since we're dealing with content creators, right, I just wanted to let them know this issue of artistic merit is a very elusive one. In other words, it's sometimes very difficult to actually pin down artistry and a piece of art. And you'll find that lots of works that masquerade as pieces of art are actually pornography or child pornography and the likes, of content. I don't want to go into Pandeli's space of telling you what's prohibited. So as a content creator, I want to take it back to you guys because you're in that space. When we say like a bona fide artistic merit, we're actually talking about how the filmmaker puts together a number of things, a number of variables in producing a piece of art that communicates a genuine message to the audience, right? And in communicating that message, what the filmmaker does is that the filmmaker will do it through the character. So in other words, we know that in that piece of art, there is an exchange of ideas. Now, this is very important for us because we content regulate, and Pandeli will come in terms of the difference between regulation and censorship. I don't want to go into that part, but what we know is that the filmmakers, right, generally have a very important role to play in society in terms of democracy, because your exchange of ideas actually is one that actually promotes democracy in any society. So artistic merit then, whilst it is a very difficult concept to define, the test for our committees, like when they're sitting in that room, right, they will have to take into consideration, for example, the piece of work in relation to the community norms and standards. And they cannot apply a subjective standard or a litmus test. It cannot be that the 3 committee members that my colleague spoke to you about, who makes this decision about the rating, will sit there and say, well, you know what, this type of thing here, explicit sexual conduct, I'm too conservative. I'm not gonna allow this film to get an 18 or a 16. And Pandeli will explain to you how we take this process forward in terms of understanding that it's not about taste, but it's actually about the community as a whole and their tolerance levels to the content created. So I'll hand over to my colleague, Pandeli. Thank you.
Pandeli, before you come in, can we now speak to a specific film, especially on the issues around educational and artistic merit? And I would want colleagues to specifically speak to the Inxeba and the Wound, because I think it is one film that created a lot of conversation in the country, and it has those issues around educational and artistic merit. So unpack it so that our audience can relate very closely to what is deemed artistic and what is deemed educational, using this film, The Wound, in particular.
So Thabiseng, I think there's quite a number of things that I wanted just to engage with, right? And I think that what Maggie raised, right? And I think let's start off with almost a contextual understanding of what the Film and Publication Board does, right? And every time I hear censorship, there's warning signs that light up, right? So let's emphasize, right? The Film and Publication Board is not a censor, right? We do not censor. That's not what we do. In regulating the space that we do, we regulate it through the process of classification, right? And what we try to do, right, is we try in executing the mandate that we do have as the regulator in this space, right, is to ensure that we actually inform our consumers of content what they're about to watch. And by informing them, in essence, what we do, and I think you guys have alluded to it already, we provide age ratings and consumer advice, right? And that, in essence, is what we do as the institution, right? So let's emphasize on that point. But we just cross that line and we raise the issue, right? Where it does involve child pornography, as the clip that we've just seen does, right? We need to then also be cautious to then be in a position to allocate it with possibly, in certain instances, a refused classification rating. In other instances, other content may also draw an XX rating, but that obviously depends on the content that is brought to us and how we then undertake the classification exercise. Now, to draw to your question, and Thabiseng, about, you know, what amounts to literary or artistic merit, right? And I think that's a very important question, and that's a question that we need to engage with, right? And you will see, and I think in my response to that and how I would like us to draw out the topic, and it's a wonderful opportunity to engage with, because as creators of content, right, the ideas that you have, the the premise upon which you want to now create content, right, in certain instances would be trying to push boundaries, right? And I think you've mentioned the films that we have mentioned, the local productions, which are topical, which draw a lot of attention on certain issues that are prevalent in our country. Some of those issues are presented in a way, right, that shows a very sort of stark reality of those issues, right? And in that instance, you'd be able to draw from that kind of literary and artistic merit that says to you, yes, it can be controversial. It can be something that pushes the boundary and pushes for debates to happen in our society. And when we do so and we engage in that exercise, right, and we say, no, then let's apply the proviso and remove it out of that category that says it cannot be consumed by the public. What we want to then do is say, yeah, we will then put it into an age category, but it may draw a high age rating, right? And it may draw a high age rating, maybe at the level of 18, that says only adults will be able to consume your content. And another topic that I wanted to raise is when that does happen, and I think with the benefit of engaging, I know this is something that Maggie will be able to speak to, right, is that you could, in the way you create your content, the way you edit, direct your content, be able to present very similar issues, but in a way that may not escalate it to the need to apply the proviso, because it would end up in the refused category, right? Put it in a category where the age rating will be maybe at a lower level, and a lot more people will be able to consume it, right? So it's something to think about, something to debate. So I'm opening that sort of door up, and I know that MZ and Maggie can talk to the kinds of the content, right, and how the content is presented, right, in a way that may then draw it to a lower age category. And here, obviously, without sort of even pushing them, so the distinction between really presenting content and thinking of content that is implied, right? Thinking of content that is presented in such a way that doesn't show you the stark reality of what happens, but allows the audience to understand it and therefore maybe lower the age category, right? But let me not speak on their behalf. Let me allow the guys to come in and give us sort of that clarity and that direction.
All right. Thanks for that, Pandeli. Can I come in, Ms.?
Yeah, before you come in, Z, I just wanted to pick out what Pandeli has actually touched on. It is important for our audience to know that the FPB does not censor, does not cut, does not advise otherwise on content that has been submitted for classification. It is very important to note that we take your content as submitted and we classify it. Now, when we find scenes in the content that are contentious and would push your content to an XX classification or a refused classification, we will assign that decision. It matters not how long that scene is in that content, for as long as there are elements that push the decision to XX or refused classification, that is what we will assign to your content. So you do not get an opportunity that says, go and cut this and bring it back to the FPB. The decision that we issue is a decision that will be attached to that content. Now, if you are unhappy with the decision that we have attached as the FPB, you have a recourse that you can undertake. We have a structure that is called the appeals board, where you can then take our decision, submit it to the appeals board for them to adjudicate on our decision and come up with the final decision. So what I'm trying to alert our viewers is that the decision of the FPB is subject to review. So you can take us on review through the appeals tribunal and have our decision interrogated and be given another rating. Now, Z, I would allow you to continue the discussion, but I want you to focus particularly on Of-Good report. What really happened there? What was the reason that we gave it a refused, and how did the appeals tribunal deal with our decision, and what were the reasons provided for? In fact, it's not from Z only, it's for the panelists as well to bring in that discussion so that our viewers can understand how the classification decision goes on appeal and how the appeal then works to finally give a decision that then is attached to the content. Thanks, Mzi, you can go on.
All right, Ms. May, thanks for that. I think I'll focus on Inxeba, right? And then just to go on details as Pandeli has alluded to earlier, right? And then Of-Good report, I'll leave it for Umeg, right? Because now we're trying to show that XX category, right? Where there's that infringement in the right to human dignity, right? So when you look at Inxeba, for example, the Xhosa people felt that there was that infringement on their right to human dignity, in a sense that their sacred place where Ulaluko, for example, in the mountains of Eastern Cape is performed, the initiation, there was sexual conduct taking place. There was language that is not normally spoken in those grounds, right? So it's similar to being in, for example, a Catholic church, right? And then you find characters having sex in that space, right? So it's those things. So what we need to focus on, right? The movie itself, Inxeba, right? It raises important questions, really, really important questions that questions a lot of things, right? That are helpful to men in general. So it talks about your masculinity, right? Issues of sexuality, what defines a man, right? Is a man a provider? If I cannot provide, am I still a man? So it raises those important questions. However, in conveying that message, you also have to look at your elements, right? How are your elements packaged, right? Because you might find a very important and educational content in your material. However, the way it is presented in your elements, it pitches it at a higher rating, right? So now looking at Inxeba, right? With all those beautiful and very positive messages about male identity. However, you go to language and sexual conduct, right? Where I think with filmmakers in general, right? Especially those who are not who are not South Africans, there's this fascination, right? About the click sound in the Xhosa language, right? And I think this can be blamed on Umama Umere Makeba with the song, right? Is that kick sound which draws nice out of the mouth, right? And even Black Panther made use of that kick sound. So now, wherever there's a film that is shot and there's Xhosa people, and this is evident even in Nakil City, they will use the word umnqund, right? Because it has that click sound. However, you find filmmakers are not aware of the impact of that word, right? Because in the movie Inxeba, it's used so frequently and gratuitously that you go to the Marys that Pandeli was talking about to ask, was it necessary for the film to use so much weight, so much of that word to umnqund, right? How is it gonna land on your 13-year-old, on your 16-year-old, right? Who are gonna be exposed to this, and they're gonna normalize this language, right? Internalize it and normalize it in their everyday life, and as a result, be morally harmful to them. So that's one part of it that was problematic, was very strong and impactful in that movie, right? That as much as the messages and the themes were positive, language was disturbing, right? And was gratuitous in the way it was presented. Because even in the Black community, we use euphemism for that type, that part of the body. You don't normally refer to umnqund, right? You use euphemism because we know how explicit, you almost cringe. Even if you are Zulu, even if you are Xhosa, you almost cringe when you hear that word in material, right? So that's how it was presented, the language. And then you go to sexual conduct as well, right? Where in our classification guidelines, we separate it into three in the way we treat scenes of sexual conduct, right? We find that it's sexual conduct, right, comes in three aspects, right? It is either implied, simulated, or explicit, right? So implied basically means it's indicated by inference, right? Rather than by direct statement. You find a couple who are waking up in bed in the morning and the lady looks at the man and is like, hey, I enjoyed that, hey? Last night, you see the actual act, but by inference, you can tell that something happened between those two, but you didn't see the act itself, right? And then you get simulated. When you talk about simulated sexual conduct, right, we're talking about the depiction of sexual conduct that creates the appearance, right, of an actual scene of sexual conduct. And a typical example will be 50 Shades of Grey or Inxeba itself, where you can see certain body parts, you can see the buttocks. However, you don't see the intercourse itself. You don't see the penetration itself. However, it creates that impression that these people are having sex, right? Which is what Inxeba fell under, right? And then you have explicit, where it's graphic and detailed, and then it leaves nothing to the imagination, right? Everything is demonstrated clearly on screen. So now you look at those two elements, and you say, as much as this movie is communicating relevant themes, right, is challenging the status quo, right? However, the sexual conduct and the language, is it treated in a way that will be palatable, right? That will be understood, that won't cause moral harm to children under the age of 18. And when you, especially, so one thing people must know, right? At the theater, it was given a 16, right? On the DVD, it was given an 18 because we have what you call impact of format, right? Which we assess in our classification guidelines to say, if material is on a DVD, you have an ability to replace scenes. You have an ability to pause scenes. You have an ability to zoom, right? The impact of elements becomes higher because now there's the risk of repeated exposure to strong language. For example, a child now will be constantly exposed to the word umnqumbi. So now that heightens the impact of the element itself, as much as maybe at the cinema level, the impact was strong, right? It was given a 16 because you were exposed to it once, right? However, the repeated exposure now, the younger the audience are, they might internalize that because our guidelines are based on the cognitive development of children, right? You look at children at the 13 age rating, they're still in the aspirational age. They want to be like what is depicted on screen. They mimic those things. If the hero is portrayed as using strong language, they might take that and use it in their everyday lives. So we look at those things, we say, who is mentally capable of distinguishing between wrong and right, even if it's not clear in the movie itself, even if in the material itself, that message is not communicated. So you find at an 18, as much as code is used frequently, we know that it is vulgar. We know that it is disabling. We know that it is demeaning to women, right? As much as there's no strong message of disapproval to say this language is wrong. However, at an 18, you are able to make that determination to say, as much as it is contained in the movie, right, I cannot use it to refer to women. I cannot use it to refer to other males as well. So those are the things that will put to the young creators. They must just take into cognizance of that. The way you treat your element, as much as your movie might be inspirational, might be educational, if your elements are graphic, if your elements are explicit and are demeaning, it will treat it at a high age rating, regardless of how positive the movie it is. Because our mandate as the FPP is to protect children, right? So now, if your content will expose them unduly to harmful material, it will cause a problem and it will attract a higher age rating.
Thank you, Mzi. Maggie, please add your views on this.
So I want to use the two films, the one that you watch now, which is Lang San, and Off Good Report. Now, in Lang San, you'd have seen a young girl, right? Maybe something like 7 or 8 years old. And you can see that she was forced and coerced into a sexual act. and she was coerced into that sexual act by her very own grandfather. So in that particular film, we are looking at the filmmaker communicating a message to the audience that this is your grandfather. So on your very own backyard, right, danger lurks. So the director is highlighting the issue of pedophilia. Now, on the other side, we have the Off-Good Report. Now, the Off-Good Report had a similar kind of thing, but it was actually looking at pedophilia from the point of view of, let's say, educators at school, right? Where Parker Sithole was the character, the anti-hero in that film. And for those of you that are familiar with that film, and if you remember what Ms. May just said earlier, that, you know, when we give a wrong rating, the filmmaker has a right, or distributor has a right to take that film on review. So in Good Report, our committee actually refused classification because when they started viewing it, inside a few minutes, they found that Sithole was having sex with an underage girl. Now, for them, they read the child pornography definition correctly. However, they did not apply the provisions in the regulations. Now, the provisions in the regulations is very clear, and I was hoping Pandeli will get to that. But in a nutshell, and I'm sure he will emphasize that at some point, what the committee should have done was to have satisfied themselves that the images that they are seeing of a child under 18, right, engaged in sexual conduct with a person that is older than them, they should have satisfied the litmus test. They should have unpacked whether that image has some sort of aesthetic value or an erotic value. So in other words, does the film, right, appeal to one sense of aesthetics? Now, in the sense of aesthetics, I think Pandeli and myself tried to unpack the bona fide status and merits of a film, whether it has a genuine message to communicate. And so what's the aesthetics of the film versus the erotic feelings that that film could invoke? Now, in both these films, right, definitely these films were not intended to invoke in the audience, in you, the viewer, erotic feelings. And neither was it intended, right, to promote child pornography. We know that child pornography in itself, right, is a prohibited criminal offense in this country. Our government, in terms of our legislative framework, have deemed this scourge of child pornography to be presumptuously harmful to children, but more importantly to society as a whole. And so in the legislation itself, it has refused classification for any content that is pure child pornography and refused it. I think Pandeli would want to come in there after me, Ms. May.
Okay, before I allow Pandeli to go in, there are 4 issues that have been raised by Mzi and Maggie that I want us to further unpack. The first one, Mzi, you raised the issues around content that is deemed to have sexual conduct, which is simulated, and also content that has sexual conduct that is explicit. Now, for the benefit of our audiences, I need you or the team here to further explain what is sexual conduct simulated. What does that mean? And what is sexual conduct explicit, and how does the age rating then get assigned on the two? That is the first aspect that I want us to further speak about. And then maybe you've just now highlighted the issues around child pornography, and the law says child pornography is outlawed in this country. We need to, and I'll request Pandeli to unpack that. We need to unpack what is deemed child pornography in terms of the law, so that our creators and producers can walk out of here having a clear understanding of what is child pornography in the film creation space. The fourth last, or the third before the fourth one, Mzi, you raised an issue around the impact of format. You have said, I can't recall whether it was Inxeba or it was of Good Report, that we gave a higher, a 16 age rating or a 12 age rating when it was viewed at an exhibition space. But when it went into a home entertainment format, the age rating was higher than that of the exhibition space. Now, please unpack what influences that, so that our audience can understand. You have the same film, it's called Inxeba. It goes to a cinema, it is given a 16 age rating. The very same film, Inxeba, it goes on to a DVD format, it is now given an 18. Why? What informs that? Now, the last issue that I want us to also further unpack for the interest of our audiences is the issues around language. Z spoke about the impact of language in influencing the age rating that is assigned. And for example, the film Knuckle City, the film that we have just watched now, where you have subtitles, and how does that language affect the actual age rating? What do we consider in the language that then gives or assists us to attach an age rating? So those are the four issues that I want us, in no particular order, let's just unpack them for the benefit of our audiences. Pandeli, you can come in there.
A lot to talk about, right? And I think I made a commitment of not being too technical in Tabi saying. So you've asked me to get a little technical, so I'm going to try my best, try to also answer the question, right? So without getting into sort of too much detail, just know that our definition of child pornography is actually captured in the actual legislation. So in the Films and Publications Act, it actually defines child pornography. It says to us what child pornography is. And I think what you're alluding to in terms of providing the necessary clarity is to indicate to our audience that it's not only the child pornography that happens in a real sense, but it can also include the simulated, right? And by simulated, there's also an emphasis there that says it doesn't have to be just a child, but it can also be somebody who is depicted to be a child. And let's for our purposes also emphasize that in terms of our legislation, it's anybody younger than 18, right? So sometimes you may have content where characters are playing the role of children, right? And you've mentioned many examples now where we have the films where there are children or actors playing the role of children, then also engaging in sexual conduct, right? So in terms of our definition, if there are actors in content playing the role of children and they are participating in simulated sexual conduct, it would quite comfortably fall within the definition for our purposes of child pornography. And I think, again, without being too technical, we also have a definition for sexual conduct, and sexual conduct does not just include the simulated sexual, I think our common understanding of sexual conduct, it's quite broad, quite all-inclusive, right? And all of those component parts, if presented in content, could legitimately warrant a description, a classification that there's content, this content actually includes child pornography, right? And that's what we would then use. And I think I always emphasize this, and I think right now it's becoming a bit of a mantra for me, right? But always, our classifiers of content, I've always emphasized to them, please, when in any situation, any doubt, and again, for our creators of content, please always go to the legislation, always go to the classification guidelines and look at the definitions. The definitions are there for a particular reason. And if you ever wanted to know why all of a sudden my content is controversial, risque, warranting higher age ratings, the definitions in essence unpack that for you. And I think you've mentioned a lot of the examples already, Ms. May, about the content which for all intents and purposes may have warranted the description that there is child pornography in such content. But we've also emphasized the need to also apply the proviso. And I think we've also described those situations where by applying the proviso, you could get outside of those refused XX categories into sort of an age rating process, right? Hopefully not too technical, but hopefully I've answered the question that you've proposed, that you wanted me to address.
Okay, thank you, Pandeli. Mzi and Maggie, just assist our audiences on the impact of format, language, as well as explicit and implied sexual conduct.
Okay, I'll go first, and then I'll leave it to Maggie then to wrap up everything, right? I just focus on the issue of your impact of format, right? How it sometimes determines age rating in movies where you find in the cinema it was given a certain age rating. However, at a later stage, a DVD or Blu-ray, it might attract a more higher age rating, right? However, let me use a typical example that I think would resonate with everyone, right? I remember a couple years ago, there was a song called Sister Bettina, right? In that song, it's about sex, right? Sister Bettina talks about sex, how we should live your life while you're still young, and just it's sexual promiscuity, basically. So once you hear that song once, you'd be like, okay, this song is not my cup of coffee, you know? You'd understand what it is about, right? However, now it started playing everywhere. Now, repeated exposure, you even have those lyrics in your head, right? Now it becomes the language you use with your friends, even the strong language that was in that song, right? You find that the 13-year-old would use the same language, because in that song, no one comes in and say, guys, at this age group, you cannot use a certain crude ways that are used in this music video, right? Or in that audio, right? Secondly, the music itself, it promotes that, right? So you can understand the impact it would have on children when exposed to it repeatedly, right? Second song, for example, which is current, right, is Abantwana Ma-Uba. It's a Mapiano song, right? In that song, they basically glamorize substance use, right? Snorting cocaine. There's even a movement they do, how you snort that cocaine, how do you cut it up, right? It's a music video, right? You experience it, it won't be as impactful and intense once you are repeatedly exposed to those actions that are depicted in how to cut the cocaine up, how to sniff it, put it up your nose, right? And the language that is being used. So you understand, it might be on your first encounter, it might be that the person is telling a story, right? However, now that you repeatedly exposed to it, it becomes more and more glamorized. It becomes more and more ingrained, it's more and more internalized, especially at the younger audience. So impact of format is very important, right? Another movie, your Captain Marvel, right? Or other movies which are released at the theater. Now we have the 3D, we have your IMAX, where you even experience your seat moving, right? So it pushes you, you become immersed in the section, in the movie, you become one with the material. So all those things, right, they contribute in how you receive the material. As opposed when I'm sitting here at home, I'm watching it in my little television, my 3x9, you know, those visuals are not as impactful. However, now when I go to the cinema, where I can even smell the coffee that is being consumed in the movie itself, where if they drop into the ocean, those drop particles come in the theater itself, you can see how now the viewer is drawn and submerged into the movie itself. So impact of format is very important. After you've noted your elements, after you've noted your themes, you also have to note how the impact will affect the younger viewers, right? They will be impacted should they be exposed to that material repeatedly.
Thank you, Mzi. Anyone on language and sexual explicit and implied sexual conduct? Anyone can just touch on that?
So let me come into sexual conduct, right? Generally, your sexual conduct is divided into subsections. There could be simulated sexual conduct, and this means that it's not actual, but it is given the made to or given the appearance of actually being actual. So in other words, in a simulated sexual conduct, you will not see you will not see certain aspects of sexual engagement. For example, so when you're dealing with the concept of simulated sexual conduct versus actual sexual conduct, you will have to have or take into consideration that section in the act that actually unpacks and defines for you in your filmmaking, right? What is sexual conduct? Now, I don't want to go to all of them, right? Safe to say that explicit sexual conduct, when you're dealing with that, you are actually looking at all the different aspects of sexual in an X18 rated movie. In other words, an adult movie. So in other words, I'll give you one example. You'll see the male genitals in a state of arousal, and you will see the actual penetration. But when it's simulated sexual, to appear like it's actual, but you're not seeing any of these. But it doesn't preclude, for example, the filmmaker narrowing in on, let's say, someone's breasts or someone's buttocks. So that's the main difference between them. Now, implied sexual conduct says that there's an inference. It's neither actual nor simulated, but it is implied, and it can be implied by, let's say, a verbal reference to it, or it could be that the filmmaker shows two people in a bedroom, removing their clothes, touching each other, falling into bed, and you know the next logical step is for them to engage in sexual conduct. However, the scene then cuts away from that, and so you get the inference of the two of them getting up in the morning that they more than likely had sexual intercourse. Thanks, Ms. May.
Thank you, Maggie. Thanks for unpacking the language aspect. I'm not going to go back to it. Now, I want us, in fact, before I go into the next topic for discussion, Mzi has mentioned a number of songs and the lyrics that are attached to them. The Amapiano song and the Sister Bettina song. I just want to highlight for the benefit of our audience that we do classify music only when it is presented in a DVD format. That's when FPB comes in to classify that music. We do not classify songs that you hear and listen to from audio. So that needs to be very, very clear so that you do not get the impression that we do classify songs as you hear them on radio or from any audio facility. I want to bring in now another issue for the panelists to unpack. we have noticed in the recent past the booming or the rising in the number of film festivals in the country that we are hosting. And the content that we receive from these film festivals is content that has been created by young film creators who are coming into the space, who are local. And the issues that we are picking up from those films that are created are either disturbing in terms of language or disturbing in terms of the sexual scenes. And I want us as a panel to unpack those issues and to highlight what we have been seeing, so that as we are speaking now to prospective creators and producers of films in the future, they are aware of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So I will open up for the panelists to just pick up and highlight the issues that we are picking up from the film festivals. Over to you, starting with Max.
I would rather Pandeli comes in on that one in terms of the film festival.
Okay.
Thank you.
So just to provide a little bit more clarity, and I think just to also guide the process along. So we do also acknowledge that when content has been submitted to us and there is the intention to host a film festival, and I think Tabi saying you'll be the sort of the perfect person to even give the details, right? The premise is that you will, as somebody who is going to host the festival, engage with the Film and Publication Board to inform it firstly that you are going to do so, duly register as a film festival, right? But ensure that you also give us an indication about what you're going to be exhibiting at the film festival, giving us enough time to be able to classify it. And the emphasis is that we will have to classify such content, right? And prior to then it being exhibited at the film festival, right? When it does come to content that we do receive for the purposes of being exhibited at a film festival, we do know, and I think we should acknowledge, and that's, I think, the space that Mzi and Maggie will also be able to provide a little bit more clarity, right? Is it's usually the more topical content, right? It's the content where people more creative ideas and space are coming out, right? And they're creating content that they want to share on topical issues and the like. We know that there's very big film festivals. The country has quite a number of them, right? There are some sort of film festivals that have on quite topical issues, and obviously they source content for those festivals that are focusing on those topical issues, right? But the premise is consistently the case is that we would nonetheless still have to classify such content, right? Same process that we undertake for the classification of content that's going to be exhibited in the public space is the same process that we would undertake for film festivals, right? And I think we do the same exercise where in providing that level of engagement, we also do engage going to be submitting content for classification for the purposes of a film festival, and you do submit it to us, you will only be getting a classification rating that's applicable for the period of that film festival, right? And that's an important distinction. Should you in the future want to then exhibit your content to the public across the board, and you want to go into theaters and you want to the public to access your content in cinemas, submit again a new application for that classification, for that content to happen in the normal course. Very technical, I know, but I'm sure that Maggie and Mzi, in terms of the quality assurance exercise that they undertake, will be able to give us a little bit more detail as to some of the topical issues that they deal with, or in terms of what the classifiers have to deal with in terms of the content that is submitted, and how we assess that and what that impact is.
I think for me, Ms. May, some of the films that we do get do kind of push the boundaries. And because they are pushing the boundaries, and because this is, let's say, being exhibited at a public in a public arena, content, for example, that may contain child pornography or X18 content but do have bona fide artistic merit in it, then becomes problematic and to be exhibited in that sort of space, in that space. So in that particular case, then what the board does, if there is such content, the board will then inform the distributor, listen, in serving the public and in protecting children, in terms of the objective of the act to protect children, we will, and it contains content that may not potentially be relevant for children or appropriate for children, then the board will then advise the distributor to actually submit that content, and then that content will be given a rating by the board. The classification unit will then release that rating, and sometimes there are strict conditions that are placed on the product in terms of it going back to the let's say the film festival itself. It may be permitted, or let's assume for argument's sake, right? We rated a film, it had child pornography elements, there were perfectly good reasons. There was sincere integrity on the part of the filmmaker in putting that scene in there. It is to be, evoking erotic feelings. So having taken all of those into account, if the board then does come up with a rating, and if that content is still not suitable for children under 18, there will be special conditions under which the exhibitor will have to show that film in that particular space. So the classification unit will give them a certificate that says 1, 2, 3 must be adhered to, no children under 18. Or if they are let's assume the public is sensitive, right, to certain elements of, let's say, explicit sex, or maybe child pornography or rape, right? There would be special conditions informing the public that it contains this sensitive content. Please be warned. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Now, the other issue relating to film festivals and the content that we come across there is an issue that I want us to further unpack and discuss here. The trends from the classification decisions that are issued relating to film festivals highlight that, yes, Maggie, you have indicated that most of the content for film festivals is seriously pushing boundaries. You find some films have got child pornography in them. Some films have got extreme sexual violence. Some films have got extreme gender-based violence. Now, the complaint that came to us as an FPB in the last financial year came from the local film distributors. And their complaint was that we are highly restrictive on content that is locally produced as compared to the ratings that we assign to content that is produced offshore. For example, we are more strict when the content has got umundu in it, Atat has got some Zulu unpleasant word Atat in it, but we are very lenient when an offshore content has got fuck, motherfucker, and all that in it. What is your view? How can we then address this issue?
I think if I may come in, right? So my colleagues alluded to how the classification process takes place. So a committee is made up of a diverse group of demographics. In other words, it represents proportionally in terms of demographics in this country, colored Indian. So it's a very balanced committee. So the committee then looks at the content, and more than likely, if let's say the content is in the mother tongue of Zulu, right? There would be a Zulu person there who understands the language first and understands the cultural nuances of the Zulu culture. So basically, we are not applying different standards to that of, let's say, Western films. Our guidelines, our legislation, etc., are applied systematically and uniformly across all different types of content. So in terms of the committee themselves who makes a decision about it, their interpretation would be in relation to the broader community, not just the Zulu people for that particular content, but they will assess the intensity and the impact of some of those elements that you are referring to. And then they've got to counterbalance with so many things. And the balance here is, let's say, community norms. How tolerant would the community be of this content, right? Then they would have to look at the balancing of rights, the freedom of expression on the one hand, and the ability to create and impart that kind of, ideas across on the other. So definitely from my side, I can say that never happens, because if it did happen, those cases would land up in the appeal court. And you spoke about the appeal process where every filmmaker has a right to course. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. So what you are actually saying is that there are no standards. Okay, the standards that we apply are uniform. We don't have standards for content created locally and standards for content created outside of the country. Now, which then I think we need to highlight to our audience that we do have a tool that we utilize in content classification, and that tool is called the classification guidelines, which is a tool that is not only prepared and signed off by the FPB, but it is put together after a whole lot of public engagements, a whole lot of research that gets done, and also roadshows across the country. So we do have a set of classification guidelines that are reviewed every 5 years, and they are informed by inputs from the public on what is it that they would like their children or the public at large to be exposed to or to be protected from. So we do apply those classification guidelines across all content, whether it is locally produced or whether it is content that comes offshore. So that needs to be very, very clear to our audience. I am actually looking at the time. We are left with the last 15 minutes of the session. And I would like to say to our audience, if you need further information on this, on the work of the FPB, or you would like to find out, you have inquiries that you need us to answer, you can send an email to us at the FPB at client support, one word, at fpb.org.za. You can also use our toll-free number, which is 0800 000 555. So we can be able to assist and respond to inquiries. One of the inquiries on the chats was asking us if we can assist them to get their content televised on the television space. And I would like to respond to everyone here that the FPB's role is to regulate, classify content. We are not involved in the distribution of the content, neither are we involved in the funding of the creation of the content. So if you need funding for a project, would be your National Film and Video Foundation, the Gauteng Film Commission, and the other provincial structures that exist across the country. They will be able to assist you with the funding model. And then in terms of distribution and marketing, and they can be able to advise you. The FPB does television or broadcasters. We are not involved in that space at all. So if you need your content to go onto the broadcasting space, you must know that that space does not involve the FPB. Now, which brings me now to the other aspect that I want Pandeli to unpack. How do we deal as the FPB? We know now that technology is here. Everyone has a cell phone, everyone has a laptop, everyone can access content from anywhere in the world through those gadgets. Now, as the FPB, how do we deal with access to content in the online space? Just unpack it for our audiences. And I believe, because they are young people, I do not think they would want their content to go on DVD in these modern times. I can assume that all of them, they want it to go onto the online space. So just unpack and advise on how that is then regulated by the FPB.
Very important question, right? And Tabi is saying, and I think that's something that we should show more, right? To assist our colleagues to understand better, right? So, or our prospective creators of content, right? So we all know, I think, that back in the day when you are as old as I am, right? We used to consume content. When we consume content, such as the content that falls within our space, we know that would usually happen possibly in cinemas and in theaters. And what we even used to do in the past, we used to buy DVDs and discs that we used to go home and play, right? And watch content. But we know that we are regulating in a very dynamic space, right? Content is not only accessed by means of going to a theater and watching a film, right? Going into a store, buying a DVD, or possibly even buying a game, right? We know that you have the ability to consume a lot of content in the online space, right? And what to emphasize for all our participants to know and for them to be aware of is that we also regulate the online space. So especially when we're dealing with blind platforms, and I think we can already start thinking about many of the platforms that are available out there. You can just, off the top of your head, start listing a huge number of those platforms that we make use of, right? That we access. You know that when the moment you access those platforms to either access either content, that is content that the FPB also likewise regulates, right? And we know that as young creators out there, as young producers of content, you would want to distribute your content, but you may not necessarily, not in all instances, be ready to go into the cinemas and theaters, right? You may be able to produce your content and create your content, but on online platforms. And I think what we encourage our creators and producers of content then to do, and I think I'm so thankful that you've shared the contact details, Ms. May, is engage with us. You know, one of the important aspects that I want to highlight is that the Film and Publication Board is, in terms of its mandate, it doesn't only limit it to just the distribution of content, right? But it also does focus on the creation and production of such content, right? And that's our regulatory space as well. And we welcome engagements with industry. We welcome engagements with creators and producers of content to see how best we can assist them in understanding what our classification guidelines say, what the implications of creating content may be for them in terms of prospective classification ratings, and importantly, like you highlighted, and Tabi saying, what the process is for me to register with the Film and Publication Board, what my process is if I want to create content and submit it to the FPB to be classified. Again, are very technical, and I think if you contact the Film and Publication Board, we've got many helpful staff that will be able to guide you and direct you in terms of what those processes are, what documents you need, you know, what it means to be registered, what it means to submit content. But all of us are are immediately ready to help you and assist you. But just the emphasis would also be that the online space is also the space within which we regulate, right? And of course, if necessary, we're always happy to provide the clarity and the detail in that regard. Hopefully that answers the question, Tabizin.
Thank you, Pandeli. Just to follow on what Pandeli has PB at client support, one word, at fpb.org.za, or you can call us on our toll-free number. You will get all the information that we can provide. If we can't provide, we will advise on where to get that information. Now, I am happy, colleagues, that we have covered all the issues that we had planned to cover today, but I am a bit unsatisfied on the X-rated material means. Can we use this last 5 minutes of the session just to unpack what is X-rated material so that our audience can know from today?
Can I do that for you, Ms. May?
Sure.
So just, I think in the back of your mind, right, I think we're quite comfortable with understanding what refused is, right? And we indicated that refused in essence will amount to child pornography, but there are other categories in the refused, right? And I think for the sake of brevity and I think trying to make sure that our audience is in a position to understand it across the board, right? Refused will also include propaganda for war, incitement of imminent violence, and hate speech, right? So just keep that in the back of your mind. So if your content has hate speech in it, it's going to warrant a refused classification. But what we will do is, again, we will see whether we can apply the proviso and get it into the age rating space. So park that for a second, and that's the refused sort of category. When we get to the XX classification, it's a bit of an extensive list, but again, to be not too technical, but nonetheless, I have to be in order to be able to describe what would fall within the XX space, right? Is that it is explicit sexual conduct, right? It will include bestiality, incest, rape conduct, right? It also includes explicit infliction of sexual domestic violence. I think you alluded to that in the beginning of our discussions, right? But also the explicit visual presentation of extreme violence, right? Again, very technical terms, happy to engage with our participants in sort of unpacking that at a greater level of detail, but just keep in the back of your mind that when it does portray any of those aspects, if your content does have any of that conduct or portrays any of that conduct, any of those acts, right? What we would then do, as we do with refuse, is we would apply the proviso, right? And that's in essence the discussion we were having about, does your content have any sort of literary or artistic merit? And see that maybe you are, and let's use the rape conduct as the example, maybe you're wanting to produce or create content, right, that shows, you know, the real lived reality of our communities where rape conduct takes place, right? It's a prevalent issue, it's a topical issue, it's something that we need to address as a country. But you are going to use that content and you're going to show it in your content and you think it's something that you want to do. But just know that it's then going to warrant an XX classification. But what we will do as the Film and Publication Board is we'll apply the proviso, right? And see whether, if it does have any sort of literary or artistic merit, work it into an age rating classification space, right? So that's what we will do in the exercise that we will undertake. So hopefully that provides clarity in terms of what XX classification means. But I'm also happy for colleagues, Mzi, Maggie, if they have any inputs to give in terms of XX as well. It's a bit topical, it's a bit technical, there's a lot of detail captured in XX, and I think we could literally have another presentation just on that, all those issues highlighted there. But it is something that hopefully we've provided some clarity on.
Anyone, Z or Maggie, if you want to add?
Okay. I think the incest part that I was looking at, Pandeli, with the XX, because they watched Lang San, and the film did have a scene of a grandfather exploiting his young grandchild, and that scene, and because they are connected by blood, that scene would amount to incest. And in this particular film, as Pandeli emphasized, that if it does contain incest, then our audience would have then given this film, if they then eliminated the child pornography section by saying, well, it has artistic merit, they would go to the next process, and the next process or the next step would be to say, okay, it contains incest, how do I get it outside of an XX? And then you would then invoke the artistic or dramatic proviso, and you in understanding what artistic and dramatic is, you would then look at the technicalities of filmmaking, whether there's a genuine message, etc., etc. So I thought bringing that, directly linking it to the film, that our participants actually, fall into place what we mean when we do apply the XX for a particular category. Thanks.
Z?
I was exactly gonna do that and use that practical example Maggie just did. So I think she covered everything.
Okay. Thank you, colleagues. I am quite happy at how the session went today, and I would like to thank the panelists. Thank you, Mr. Mzigaise Mota. Thank you so much. Ms. Maggie Pillay, thank you. Mr. Gregorio Pandeli, thank you so much for making this session quite exciting. And I would like to thank our audience as well for joining us and being with us for the 2 hours. I trust and I hope that the information shared with you today has added some value in your career as a young person. And I would also like to remind you that taking cue from the youth of 1976, who led and ensured that we have the freedom and the democracy we have today, the challenge is now in your court. You are the youth today. Take up your own challenge to make sure that this country becomes a better country in the next 44 years. When we meet with you in 44 years' time, let us be able to count the changes that we have brought to the country. And to everyone else who joined this session, thank you so much for making it possible. And our partners, how can I forget them? National Film and Video Foundation, thank you so much for granting us this opportunity. Gauteng Film Commission for reaching out and making sure that we are part of this partnership. The Gauteng province and all other partners who have given us the platform and the opportunity to engage our young people out there. It is the intention of the FPB actually to reach out to as many young people as possible. We have the interest of the youth at heart because we want to empower them. We are now faced with the virtual world. And in that virtual world, that is where a lot of victimization, a lot of bullying and all other issues happen. And as the FPB, we are there to offer you with that support. We are also there to help you develop and grow as creators and producers of films. I have shared my contacts on this page. If you need further information, please do not hesitate to contact the FPB on our email address, which I will repeat now, client support, one word, @fpb.org.za, or you can call us on our toll-free number, 0800 000 555, or you can send me an email directly if you want to have an intimate conversation with me. My email address is ntabiseng.may@fpb.org.za. Don't also forget to go and visit our website, our social media pages, our Facebook and our Twitter pages. There is information there for you to access. Thank you, colleagues. It is now 4 o'clock. Thank you so much for an awesome session. Goodbye to you all.
Gauteng province has created a relief for the benefit of individuals within the sports and arts sector. This is out of the realization that sports and arts continue to be one of the sectors that is hardest hit by the COVID pandemic. And in this regard, as a caring government, we have found means of how we can create some form of relief for individuals within the sectors, but also possible job opportunities. And in this regard, one of the things that we have done with all the national events or national day events that we do have, we've made them virtual and are still able to employ and work with various artists and sports individuals. And this has been done from our Human Rights Day, our Freedom Day, and now with Youth Month. We continue to integrate artists and sports individuals within, so that whilst COVID does not allow for major events to take place, by going virtual, it enables us to still be able to utilize these skills and showcase the talent that the province has. With regard to the Gauteng Relief Fund that is created for individuals within the sports and arts sectors, this is a relief fund of 28 million, which we seek to find individuals who work within our communities. These may be individuals who teach art classes within communities, who coach soccer teams within communities, netball teams and so forth across the various sporting codes. These are the individuals who play a critical role in the development of our communities. These are people who ensure that our communities keep fit and, more importantly, are engaged within positive recreational activities. Our fund is geared at all these people, and all we ask is that you come and apply, visit our website, visit our social media pages at Gauteng SACR, that's at Gauteng SACR, and you'll be able to get more information. We really want to make sure that we assist these individuals because we appreciate the work that they do in our communities, because it is in line with what government seeks to do, and we want to make sure that people continue being engaged within positive activities such as recreation, within arts, within our sports, and so forth. So please do apply. This fund is for you.
Films, games, and publications may contain numerous kinds of content, of which some can offend or be downright unsuitable for certain age groups. This is where we come in. The Film and Publication Board, or FPB for short, exists to help regulate what content you or your child gets exposed to. Along with the help from the public and cooperation from distributors, we set out to ensure that anyone and everyone can make informed decisions when deciding on what to watch, play, or read. Now, please sit back, relax, and allow me to quickly show you how we can achieve these goals and elaborate as to what we actually stand for. First and foremost, concerning our mandate and function, the FPB has 3 objectives. Namely, number 1, to provide consumer advice to enable adults to make informed viewing, reading, and gaming choices, both for themselves and for the children in their care. Number 2, to protect children from exposure to disturbing and harmful materials and from premature exposure to adult experiences. And number 3, to make the use of children in and the exposure of children to pornography punishable. We fulfill our mandate through the classification of films, games, and certain publications, registration and exhibitors, and the determination of exemption applications. To clarify, classification is the process of assigning age ratings and consumer advice to all films, games, and certain publications that are distributed or exhibited in South Africa. Even though the FPB and its partners do anything and everything in our power to protect children from harmful material, at the end of the day, it is a shared responsibility. Members